So continuing with HTTP that we had started in the previous video. In this video, we will cover more about HTTP and also learn about additional functionality like authentication, which is login, logout, local storage, and protected routes. So in the previous video, we had started with REST APIs and we had covered get and post. And in this, we will cover the put and delete. So put, as you know, is used to update a resource. So in the products app that we were creating in the previous video, let's add the functionality using put to update a resource. So we will use put, and the URL for the put is /productsApp/products/:ID. ID refers to the ID of the product whose data we are updating. And the data sent to the server is stored in the body of the request. So what we need to implement is edit the product details in the product app, and the API to use is put /productsApp/products/:ID. So the process we will follow is the same. First, run the API in Postman so that we understand the API. So in Postman, we had the get. So if I run the get, so for this URL, we can get the details. So we have gotten the details for the product whose ID was 8237. Let's use put here. So I will just create another request. Type is put. The URL will be the base URL /productApp/products and /8237. In the body, let me send the data as a JSON. And let me just copy it from here. And let's say instead of it being 1 liter, I make it 750 ml and the price as 72. Let's go ahead and send it. So once I send it, it sends me back the response. It's all okay. It sent me a response. If I go ahead and run my get again, we can see that the data has been updated and it has become port 750. So this is how the API is being run. So now let's go ahead and implement it. So the way to implement would be that I would add a button here for edit. And when we click edit, we would go back to our add product, use this to run our edit. So let's start doing that. So in our products, let's show the edit. So let me just add here functionality for edit. Button class name is equal to btn warning btn sm. And what do we show here? Text is edit. And I will add an on click. On click is equal to this dot edit product, and I will pass the ID. What is the ID? er dot. So now let's implement this function edit product. So edit product is equal to, it takes an ID, and what does it do? It just routes to this dot props dot history dot push slash products slash the ID of the product. So this is $ID slash edit. So let us navigate to this URL. So let's just add in our main component. Slash edit, and this goes to add product. So we will use the same add product that we had used to add a product. Now if I go to my add product, So now in our add product, what do we need to do? If we have come through add product, which are the two ways we can come here? We could have come through /product/add, in which we need to show an empty form, or we could have come by /product/:id/edit, in which case what do we need to do? We need to get the details of that product and populate them in the form. So if I go to my add product, we will need to populate the details. Now how do I get the details? If I go back and look at my product, in the product we had created those details. So let me just copy that code. So in our ComponentDidMount, let's get the details of the product. Now we might not have the ID because we would have come through the case of an add product. So I can just put if ID. So if ID is truthy, then only we need to do this. Otherwise, we don't need to do it. The other change I will make here is I will just put another field in the which tells us whether we are in the edit mode or we are in the add mode. So here in this case, if the ID was here, so we will update the state by also saying edit is true. Now once we have done that, what do we need to do? We need to update our fields. This should work fine. The only thing I can do is, because the ID is say not changeable, I will make it read only. So read only is equal to this dot state dot edit. So if it is edit, then the ID is read only, otherwise it is not. The rest works absolutely fine. And in the case of submit, what do we need to do? We will need to post the data if it was an add product, a new product. Otherwise, we will need to use a port. So let us go to our HTTP service and just create a port. So function port, it takes a URL and it takes an object, just like post. Return axios.put this API URL plus URL, comma, obj. And we will also export the port. So if we go back to our add product, whenever we are handling our submit, we can say if, let's destructure it. So we can say const product comma edit is equal to this dot state. So if edit is truthy, then what do we need to do? Then we need to do this dot put data. This, so like we have defined a post data, let us just define a put data. So let me just copy it. So there is a put data which just calls put. So then we need to do this dot put data with the URL. What will be the URL? The URL will be /productApp/products/ and the ID. So what is the ID? Product.id. And what is the data we want to send? Product. Otherwise, what do we want to do? And I can just say. So this should be our handle submit. So in case it's an edit that we are doing, we will do put. Otherwise, we will call the post data function. So let's test it out. How does this work? So we get the edit buttons, and now say if on A237 I click on edit, so you can see I've gotten the form. This is read only. We have Coke 750 ml and product price 72. So let me make it say 830 ml and say the price as 74. And now if I submit it, here we can see A237, Coke 830 ml and 74. If we go to the network, let's clear the network once and run it again so that we can see what's happening. Let's do it for some other product, say 102, edit, and let's make it as say 550 ml. Now if I click on a submit, this is the request we made, which was a put request, you can see. So this was a put request and we got the response back, and then we moved to products. And when we came back to products, we can see it has become 550 ml. So this is how we have been successfully able to implement the put. Now after put, we need to understand and implement delete. So what is delete used for? Delete is used to delete the specified resource. So in our productsApp API, it has provided this API delete /productsApp/product/:id. So what does this mean? We want to delete this product, which is denoted by this ID, whose ID is this. So we need to implement this delete the specified product, and the API we want to use is this delete /productsApp/product/:id. Again, the process will be the same. Let's go to Postman and test it out. So let's say we have this A237. Let us just go ahead and delete it. So let me make a delete. The URL will be this /productapp/products and A237 the ID, and delete does not need a body. So this product has been deleted, and now if I go here, you can see I get not found. So this product does not exist, we did not get it. So this product has been successfully deleted. Let's go ahead and implement this functionality also. So if we go to our products, let's add a delete button like we added a edit. So let me just copy this part. And this will be delete. And let's call it say delete. And just like we made the edit, let me make another functionality, say delete product. And this goes to. So now in our main component, let's do another routing. Let's add another route /delete, and let's say it goes to delete route. So here we have created another component, delete product. So what do we need to do in this component? In our ComponentDidMount, we will just make a delete request, fetch the ID and make a delete request. So let's, in our HTTP service, let's create a delete. So function delete, it takes a URL and it will return axios.delete base API URL plus URL. Now delete typically will give us an error here because it's a reserved keyword. So I will just name it as a delete request and export it. So if it also gives you the same error, just rename it as delete request. So the name of your function is delete request. Let's go to our delete product. Now in our ComponentDidMount, we need to get the ID. So I can just say let ID is equal to this dot props dot match dot params. And once we do it, what can I make? I can just make a request to HTTP dot delete request with the URL. So what's the URL? /productApp /products/ so that's the, and we can just say let response is equal to await. And once we get the response, what do we need to do? Let's just go back to products because we will display the products again. So this dot props dot history dot push / products. So we will route back there, and because we used an await, we need an %. We will also need to define the render. So what will render for this do? We can just return an empty. So here we have created our delete product. We can just go to our main component and now import it. Import delete product from delete. So now that we have implemented both our delete product and everything, let's go ahead and test it. So here we have the delete functionality, we have the edit. Now say A101, if I click on delete, we can see that it seems to have been deleted. If we go and check the network, what do we get? So this was a delete request we made and we got the response as okay. And then when we went to the products, this product has been deleted. Let me clear the network and now delete A232. So A232 has also been deleted. Similarly, I can delete whichever products we want. So that is how we can implement our delete request. And note in the server, just restart the server if you want to test it again, if you have deleted all of it. So just restart that server and test it again. Now in our HTTP request, we have been seeing some status like 200 OK that we saw in our Postman also. So what are these? These help us understand the response that we are getting. So there are multiple series of these numbers starting from 100. So 1XX, which is 100 series, 200 series, 300, the 400 series and the 500 series. These are the typical series. The most important for us are the 200 series and the 400 series. So that's where we will focus. The 200 series, in which 200 is the most commonly used, refers to as success. So whatever we did was successful, so it came back as a success. The 400 series indicates client error. So whatever data we sent was an error. There was some issue there. And three most commonly used client errors, and some of them which we will implement, is 400, which indicates a bad request, which means that there was something wrong with the request that we made. 401, which means unauthorized, means you have to first log in to use that service. And 403 means forbidden. It means that you have logged in, but you do not have enough access rights. So your role by which you logged in did not allow you those permissions. So these are three of the most common ones that we will study and use. Similarly, there are the 500 series, which are server errors, errors from the server, and we will not focus on it here. So you would have commonly seen 500, which is internal server error or those kind of errors. But here our focus is to handle these 400 requests. So we had created an add a new product. Now suppose the server says that we will only allow you to create a new product if the ID does not already exist. If the ID exists, I will send back a 400 status that the ID already exists. We cannot allow you because the ID is unique. Otherwise, we will send you a 400. So how should we make this change? So the exercise for us is update the product app to handle the error if the ID exists while adding a new product. If there is an error, display it in the add product form. So remember, we had done display of errors while doing validations. So in the validation field, we will display these errors, and the API is the same. So now, how do we understand this API? We can go ahead and test it in Postman. How can we test it? We will just send a product whose ID exists, and it should send us a 400 and a message. Let's test it out. So here in Postman, I have sent a GET request to say A237, and I have restarted my server, so all my data is coming fine, and done it. Now let us use a post. So in the post, in the body, let's say the ID I send is A237. So that is our objective, that if we send the same ID, what response does it send? Now you can see it has given us a status 400 bad request. So it sent us a 400, which is a bad request. And the message it has sent is product ID already exists. And say if I don't send A237, I sent A238, then it has sent me a 200 OK, which means this was fine, and it sent me the details. So these are the two differences. So if the product was successfully constructed, created at the server, it sent me a 200 OK. And if there was an error, it sent me a 400. So how should we handle this in our code? So that's our objective. So in our post data, in our add product is where we are making the post request. And this is where we need to handle the error. So the way to do it is we will wrap this in a try and a catch block. And we will catch that exception. So exception is something that will get generated if this problem occurs. So if we get the 200 or the 2xx response, it will continue to execute itself. Otherwise, it will come to the exception. So we can just say if we have received the response, if the response is truthy, and the ex dot response dot status is equal to 400. So that's the error we want to handle. We would have gotten a 400 error. Then what do we need to do? We need to display it. So we can just say let errors be an empty string and errors dot. So we had the field ID. Yes, errors dot ID is equal to dot response dot get. And what can we will just set it in our set state. So this dot set state errors is errors. So this will update our state here, and we can just go ahead and handle it in our ID. We can just say this, or I can just destructure let errors is equal to this dot state, and if it is not present, it will become null only. So we can just, or we can initialize it to null also. So it may not be present. So we can just say here if errors is truthy. So if the errors is truthy, then what do we need to do? We can just say and span class name is equal to danger. And what is the message we want to show? Errors dot. So that's our message. So this should display it. Let's go ahead and test it. So here let's go to our add product, and let me say which is the ID we want. Say A101 is the ID. I will duplicate A101. Product is test1. Price is 101. Now if I click on submit, we get product ID already exists. This here should have been text danger. That will probably look better. Let's go back and test it again. A101, say test1, price 101, submit, and we just get product ID already exists. We get that error. And suppose if I make it say 102, is there a 102 also? Yes, there was a 102. Let's go back to add product. Let's say B1010, test1, price 1010. And this works perfectly fine. So this is the change. So wherein we have handled the error and we have displayed the message for it. And if we go to our network, we can see we got the 200 whenever we made that error, and in the end, whenever we made the right request, we got the 200 with it. Now there is a certain error in this app, and if you can see, so let's say I go to edit of A232. So this is being edited, and now if I click on add product, this form should have been emptied, and these values should have been empty. So this did not happen, although the URL is showing as add. So this is a problem. So why is this problem happening? This problem is happening because the same component is getting rendered, and what had we done? We had put the changes in state. So if we go back to our code, add product, we had put a component did mount, and that was affecting the state. So when the render is happening, there is no change in the state, and there is no component did mount change. So nothing is changing here. So how do we handle this change? So like we had done earlier, so component did mount only happens for the first time. So we will also need to do a component did update. So, and we get the previous props and the previous state. And note when this change is happening. So when I am here and I clicked on add product. So suppose I was on BO0234. So my props would have been different, and when I have clicked on add product, my props have changed. So if my props have changed, if previous props is not equal to this dot props, what do I need to do? I need to do this activity again. So let me put this into say a function, get say product data, and because there is an await here, I'll async it. And let's use this function in both of them. So this dot get product data. Similarly here, I will just call this dot get product data. And in this case, if the ID is not there, then also we will need to update it. So suppose the use case was that I get up ID, and now somebody has clicked add, so which means my state has to be reset. So if ID is not there, else let's say let prod1 is equal to, this is my empty product, so let's create it, and I can say this dot set state, product is prod1, and what should be edit in this case? Edit is false because there is no ID. So that's the change we have made. So in both the cases, now with component did update, this problem should go away. Let's test it. If I go to products, I click on edit, so I am on edit. Now if I click on add product, you can see I have gotten an empty product, which is what it should be. If I go back and say test for something else, so I get B035. If I click on add product, I have gotten a empty form. So let's just recap what we did. So earlier, because we were just using ComponentDidMount, that was creating the problem because my state was not changing. and because my state was not changing, it was not getting re-rendered. Now what would we do? We checked our previous props versus our current props in ComponentDidUpdate. As you know, ComponentDidUpdate will become called every time. So now, because of that, my state, I have been able to update the state. And what did we do in the state also? What we did was also we updated the state in the else condition when the ID is not there. Why did we update the state? Because it could have had some values here. So we would need to put an empty form, the empty JSON, so which is what we did, and the edit as false. So this is important. Just ensure you have understood this and you are able to implement it. And it's a concept very similar to what we had used for pagination earlier. So it's exactly the same concept that we are using, but here we have used it in a form. And in forms, if you face this issue anywhere, this is the standard way you can handle it. The next thing that we will cover in this video is login and logout. So the products API, the products app has an API for login. So there is a post/productsApp/login, and it sets a 400 status if the login failed. Otherwise, it sends a 200 with the details of the user. So what is our objective? Implement the login functionality. If the login fails, show the message in the form. Otherwise, route to /products. The API to use is post/productsApp/login. So the reason we use post here is otherwise in the URL we will see the data. So post is much better to use. And the sample data given to us is, this is two users have been given to us. Username EMP101, password is the same EMP101, or username EMP211 and password EMP211. So the steps we will follow are the same. First, let's test it in our Postman. So in our Postman, let's define a post. What's the URL? /login, and body, what do we need to send? Username is EMP101 and password is EMP101. So this is the JSON that we want to send, and this should return us a 200. So let us send it and let's see what do we get. We get a 200, okay, and it sends us back this data with the username, the name and the row. Similarly, let's test it with something else. So let me set it, say EMP104, and it gives me a 400 bad request, invalid username or password. So this is how this API works. So let's go ahead and implement it. So here we have created a login form. It's a simple form with a username and a password. So it takes a password, which is type is equal to password, and a username. And what do we want to do? So we need to do the handle submit. So in the handle submit, we will post the data. So let's start defining that. So let's say post data. Now what does it get? It will get the URL and the object. Now what should it do? It should say let response is equal to http.post URL comma object. That's what we will do, and we will just put an await here. Once we have done that, we know there will be an error. There is a possibility of an error also. So let's put this in our try catch like we did earlier, and then we will do the catch. So let's first implement this part of it. So once the response comes, we can just go to the /product. So I can just say this dot props dot history dot push /products. This is what we can do. So here we will say if ex dot response and ex dot response dot status is 400, then what do we need to do? We will need to set the error message. So let's say let errors is equal to, and errors dot, let's say in the username field we have put the error ex dot response dot data. If you were using errors in this form, we have not handled errors, so which is why we have done it in this fashion. Same in add products, we had not handled errors. If you were handling errors, we will clone the errors object as we have been doing and then insert this into it. So ensure that, and once we have done it, we will just do this dot set state errors is, and in our display, let's destructure errors also. Let errors is equal to null is equal to this dot state, and here we can say errors and errors dot username. So if these two are truthy, then what do we need to show? We need to show span class name is equal to text danger, and what's the message we want to show? Errors dot user. So why are we using it like we used earlier? So we know in JavaScript it will, because we are doing an AND, it will continuously evaluate it and it will return the value of this as the expression. So if errors is truthy and errors.username is truthy, means this will be returned, which is what we will see. What we also need to do is go to our nav bar, and in our nav bar, let's add a link for login. Login is login, and in our login, did we do everything? We forgot to integrate it here, so let's do that. So what do we need to call? This dot post data, or let's, instead of calling it post data login, let's call it login. This dot login. What's the URL? The URL is /productApp /login, and the object is form. This dot state dot form. So we have done that. In our main component, let's import login. Import login, and let's define the route for login. So now that we have defined the route for the login and also in the nav bar, let's go ahead and test it. So here we have the login form. So let's put in say emp101, and let me put it some random password. So this should give us an error. So it has given us invalid username or password, and you can see in the network we have gotten a 400. Let me put the right password, emp101. So we have gotten a 200 and it's gotten routed to products. So this is exactly what we were looking for. So this is how we have implemented the same using post the login functionality. An interesting concept is local storage. So what is local storage? Local storage is a feature that is supported by all browsers, and it allows saving of key value pairs in the browser. So it allows some amount of data to be used, to be saved in the browser, and it is shared between all tabs and windows from the same origin. So it based on the URL, the host. So for the same host, it is shared. If I open multiple tabs, multiple windows, the same local storage is shared based on the origin, which is the host. And this data does not expire. So once you have put it in the local storage, it does not expire. Even if I close the browser, restart the browser, restart my computer, my laptop, the local storage remains the same. So it does not expire. So local storage is very valuable in storing say kind of login data, and that is what we will do. So our objective is to use local storage to save the details of the user after a successful login. So here in login, we were able to log in and we got this response here. So we want to save this response, the data that we got back from the server, into local storage. And the purpose of it is that once it is there in the local storage, all the different components can go ahead and use it. So for that purpose, what we will create is a folder called services. So we will put a lot of services here. So we had created a service earlier, the HTTP service. So what we will also create is now, let's say, an auth service, so that we can use it for authentication. So we will create these two in our services. So the first thing let's do is move our HTTP service to services. So our HTTP service we have moved to services, and we should go ahead and change the path everywhere. So the path as we moved it should have gotten changed. So it will now become dot dot, which is going back one directory up /services /HTTP service. So check it in your add product, your delete product should have gotten updated, the login should have gotten updated. Similarly, the products, the product, all these should have gotten updated based on that. The other thing we will create is another file here, say authservice.js. So here we have created an empty file authservice.js, and let's start using that for this purpose. So now what do we want? When our user has logged in, we want to save the data in the local storage. So let's, in our auth service, let's create functions. So let's create say a function which is to, let's call it say login a user. So what do we do in login is we will get the data, the object from the service, and we want to save it in the local storage. So how do we save it in the local storage? We will say local storage dot set item, and this is a key value. So a key and a value, and note both of them here are strings. The key will be a string and the value is a string. So we have gotten an object from the server, so we will need to convert it into a string, and we also need a key. So let me say const key name, which we will be using, will be say user. So we can say here key name, and we need the object to be converted into a string. So how do we create an object into a string? So the way to do it is, let's say str is equal to json dot stringify, and if we pass it an object, it will return us a string. So now I can say key name dot string comma string. So we have saved this JSON as a string, as a key value pair in our local storage. We will need to export it, so I can just say export default, and what's the function? Now let's go back to our login and let's import this. So import, let's say call it say maybe auth for authorization from dot slash services slash auth service. So here once we have gotten the response, we can just say let data is equal to response and auth dot login. So now let's test it. So now say if I log in with EMP101. So I have successfully logged in. Now where can I see the local storage? So if we go to application here you can see in storage we have local storage, and this is the our host, so our URL, and here you can see the key which is user and the value which we put in. So this has been put in as a string. So we have gotten the JSON object, stringified it, which is converted it into a string and put it. So this was our objective. So we created this auth service and we have in the login put it into our local storage. The next part says also implement logout, which removes the details from local storage. So in our nav bar, let's just put a logout also. And in our main component also, let's define another logout, a route and a component. And let's define a component logout. Now what should logout do? In our ComponentDidMount, what should we say? We should clear this local storage. So how do we clear the local storage? Let's go to our auth service. Let's say define a function logout. Now what should logout do? Logout should say local storage dot remove item, and which item? Key name. Now if we do that, the local storage will be cleared, and hence from our perspective we have logged out. Remember, we are not logging out from the server here, we're just doing a local logout here. And here what we can say, we can just say auth dot log, and in our render we just do a return empty. So now if we go ahead and test it, so we have the login, we have the logout. Now if I click on logout, you can see that this has been cleared, and at logout I should have say, let us here say this dot props dot history dot push, and let's say we want to go to login. Once we log out, let's go and test it. So let me log in again, EMP101, EMP101. I log in. You can see we have gotten that in our local storage. Let me click out log out. The local storage has been cleared and we have gone back to login. The next says in the nav bar show either login or logout depending on the current status. So right now we have been showing both login or logout. Now depending upon the status, we want to show either login or logout. So there are multiple ways we can do it. One is we just get the user here, the user details and pass it to our navbar. Let's do that. So what do we need also then is a function, say get user, which gets those details. So how do I get those details? I can say local storage dot get item key name, and note this will be a string. So let str is equal to this, but we want to convert it into a JSON to use it. So how should I convert it? So I can say let obj is equal to JSON dot parse the string. Once we parse it, it will return us the object, and I can return the object. So while putting it, we converted it into a string, and while taking it out from the local storage, we have converted it back into a JSON using JSON.parse. So JSON.stringify to convert it into a string, and JSON.parse for this. And let's export this. Let's go to our main component. Let's import from auth. So I can say const user is equal to auth dot get user. Now there should be a case here when I am doing it here that this string could be null. So if I can say here, so if str is truthy, we parse it, otherwise it is say. So this is our object, and now if I go to our main component, we can just say pass it user is equal to say. Now that's the user we have passed. So now in the navbar, what we can say that if the user exists, if not user, then I need to show the login. So we are saying if the user does not exist, and let's restructure the user. Const user is equal to this dot props. If the user is truthy, we do not show the login. So if it is falsy, we show the login. Similarly, when do we show the logout? When user is truthy, means we have been logged in, so we show the. Let's go ahead and test it. So initially we are seeing the login. Why are we seeing the login? Because there is no value here, so it is falsy, and hence we are seeing login. Now let me log in. EMP 101. EMP 101. Now the moment I have logged in, it's still showing me login, although the user would have logged in. Now why is this happening? The reason this is happening is that the state of the navbar has not changed. So one way to handle it is that when my login happens, because everybody needs to take care of the login data, instead of saying this.props.history.push, we just do a full reload of the site, of the page. So I can just say window.location is equal to /products. So instead of using the history.push, if we do this, it will just do a reload, and let's see what happens. So I've cleared this object. We are getting a login. Now if I click on login and do a login, you can see we have gotten the login, and then because we did a full page reload, we have gotten the logout. If we did not do it, then the navbar was not being able to reflect this change. And how did we do a full page reload? We used window.location is equal to slash products instead of the history.push that we were using. So now using this in our navbar, depending upon our state, we are doing it. Now what should we test? If I click on logout, it should become a login. Now when I am doing a logout, again there is the same problem that this is not refreshing. So how should we handle that? So instead of doing a props, I can just say window dot location is equal to slash. So we will not use the history. So let's test it again. emp101 login. This has become a logout. And now if I click on logout, it becomes a login. So this is exactly what we were looking for. Let us say in the product app, depending upon the user, whether the user is logged in or not, the following has been told to us. A logged in user can only add a product. A logged in user with the role as admin can only edit or delete a product and view the list of users. And rest of the functionality can be viewed by anyone. So what we want is that depending upon what the status is, whether a user has logged in or not, and what the role of the user is, only those functionalities should be made visible. So for example, here, if I am on add product and nobody has been logged in, so this add product should not be visible. Similarly, what's been told to us that in edit and delete should only be if the role of the user is admin, otherwise these should not be visible. So how should we do that? So remember when we were logging in, if we just do a login again, 101, the role is coming here. So in the object which has been sent back and that we are storing in the storage, the local storage, we get role is user. And if we say check the other data that was given to us, emp211, you can see that the role is admin. So we have two roles, admin or user. So depending upon who has logged in, we will start handling it. So first thing, let's go to the navbar. And in the navbar, what do we want to show? In the products add. Now products add, it's been said any user can do it. So I can just say if user is truthy, then only we will show the add. Otherwise we will not show it. So whenever a user is logged in, then only the add product link will be shown in the navigation. This is fine. Second, what do we need to do in our products? So what do we need to do in our products? If the user has the role admin, then only we should show these edit and deletes. So let's first get the user. So for that, let's import the auth service. And let's get the user. So const user is equal to auth dot get user. Now once we have gotten the user, the edit and the delete, this is the edit and the delete. Let's say user is truthy and user dot role is equal to admin. Then we need to show it. So and let's put this here. Now this should give us an error because it needs a single parent. So let's wrap it into a react.fragment. So now this is working fine. So let's go ahead and test it. So the first thing, there is no login, so it's not showing us the add product, which is perfectly fine. Let's now log in with say EMP101. So EMP101 is role is user. So we can see the add product, so that's fine. And in products, we are not seeing the edit and the delete. Let's log out. The moment I log out, you can see add product has gone away, so that's also fine. Let's log in with the other role, EMP211, EMP211. So now this is role admin. We can see the add product and you can see the edit and the delete functionality. Those things are also showing here. So this is exactly what we were looking for. So this is working absolutely fine. So in the admin, we also wanted to show the users. So let's just first check the API for it. So the API for that is if we do a get / users. So it gets us the details of all the users as a array. So this is what we need to implement with this get. So in our users, just using that API, we have just called a get on the /product/users and displayed it the standard way. And in our main component, we have just added the route for /users. And the main thing was in our navbar. So just like we did it in our edit and delete, we have just said user and user.role is equal to admin. And then we have just added this nav item and the link in the navbar. Let's go ahead and test it. So now we have been logged in with the role as admin. So we can see users. I can see the users. If I log out, we can see there are no users here. And now if I can log in with EMP101, there are no users here. So that's exactly what we were looking for. Let me log out the user. And now if I physically type in here, say, instead of saying login here, I say product/app. Now what you can see here that this route, when I typed it in, although in the navbar it is not showing in, the user can type and the user can reach here. So ideally we would not want this to happen, that the user can type this URL and do it. The same thing we could say, we could have done for edit also. So if I say 237/edit, we get that with the edit. Now this is not what we were looking for. Or if we do users, again the admin should have only gotten it, we are getting those details. So this is a problem that is still not solved. So in the navigations that we have seen, we have shown it conditionally based on what the status was, who was logged in, what all we wanted to show. But these URLs are still working. So how do we do that? So we have a concept in React known as protected routes. Now what does protected routes means? As the name suggests, we are protecting the routes. And we are protecting the routes to ensure only authorized users can access certain parts of the site or those URLs that may contain private information. So there are certain parts of the site that we want to, based on our authorization of users or on our login status and our roles, we want to ensure. And what we would do, if any unauthorized access is there, we will redirect it to a suitable route. So this is our objective, and this concept is referred to as protected routes. So in the product app, protect route for add a product so that only a logged in user can access it. So here in our main component, what do we need to do? If the user is falsy, if the user is null in the get user, then we do not want to render it here. Suppose we have defined another not allowed component. It just says this functionality is not allowed. We want to redirect the user there. So let me first define a route. That is equal to say /not allowed. component is equal to not allowed. And this is the component that we have imported. So now this is what we need to do. So here what we can say is, instead of component we can use render, which we have used earlier, and we can say props goes to. Now if user is truthy, then what do we need to do? We can just render the add product, and within that spread the props. Otherwise, what should we render? Otherwise, we should do redirect with 2 is equal to slash not allowed. Otherwise, we will redirect here and we close our props. So this is what we have done. So what we are saying, the path is the same. In our render, we have put now a condition that if user is truthy, then render add props, add product. Otherwise, we redirect it to not allowed. Let's see now what happens. Let's test it out. So here we are not logged in. So let me now just say products / add. And you can see we have been redirected to is not allowed. Let me log in. Let's say emp101 e101. So now in this case, if I in the URL type /add, it's showing me the form. So this is how we have protected that route, that now unless the user is logged in, this URL or this route will redirect itself to not allowed. So we have protected this route. What does the next part say? In the product app, protect routes for edit a product, delete a product, view users, so that only a logged in user with admin role can access it. So add product was for a logged in user. These three we want to protect so that only a user with admin role can access it, nobody else. So in our main component, let's first go and say protect users. So now what do we need to do? Instead of saying, we will say render is equal to props goes to. Now what do we say here? If user is truthy and user.role is equal to admin, if these two conditions are true, then what do we need to render? We will render this users. Then that's what we need to do. We will render users, and within that we should spread our props. Otherwise, what should we do? Otherwise, we should redirect to not allowed. This is our objective. So let's just check it. So if this condition is true, truthy, this is what we do. Otherwise, and let's close this part. So this is what we have said. If user is truthy and user.role is equal to admin, then we go to users, we render users with the spreads, with the prop spread. Otherwise, we redirect to not allowed. Let's test it. So here I have logged in with the role user. So let me just say, if I go to slash users, it just shows this functionality is not allowed. Let me log in with the admin emp211 emp211. Now if I go to slash users, it is showing me the set of users. And if I log out completely and now go to users, again it says this functionality is not allowed. What we could have also done if the user was not logged in, I could have just said if user is truthy, then we will just say if user.role is this, otherwise here. Otherwise, I could have also said go to, or I can just render login with the props. So in this case, what we are saying, if the user is truthy, then check the role. If the role is also admin, then render users. Otherwise, redirect to not allowed. Otherwise, we are saying just go to a login. You're not logged in. You're trying to render to access an protected route. Just go ahead and log in. Let's do that. So if I go to now users, it has sent me to a login. If I go to an EMP211, I should check it with say EMP101, which is user. Now if I go to users, what should it show? It should show not allowed, which is what it is showing me. And if I log out and then go with EMP211, now if I go to users, I get the set of users. So this is exactly what we were looking for, and we have just put it in the if. So again, let me repeat it. If user is truthy, then we check the role. If the role is admin, then we render users. Otherwise, we redirect to not allowed. Otherwise, we could either have said a redirect to login, or we have just rendered the login. Now, is there a difference between choosing a login or showing a redirect? How should we see that? So suppose I was on users here. Now, if I click on users, it just shows my URL again as slash users. Ideally, it should have been login. So in that case, if that is what we're looking for, then we should have just said redirect to is equal to slash login, which would have ensured that the URL remains correct. So in this case, the URL would have been correct. So that's the difference between the two. So because of that, this is a slightly better solution. So now we have done it for the users. We need to do the same thing for our edit and delete. So if we go here, again we need to do the same thing. So let's start writing it. Render is equal to props. And what do we do in our props? If user is truthy and user.role is equal to admin, then what should we do? We should just render add product with the props spread. Else what should we do? If the user is truthy but it is not admin, then we should redirect with to is equal to not allowed. Else what should we do? Else we should redirect to login. So this is what we are looking for. The same thing we should put in for the delete. So let me now just copy it. So instead of here, component is equal to delete product, I will put it here, and here this should be delete. Let's go ahead and test it. So now if I say products A237/edit, it just shows me, it redirects me to login. If I have logged in EMP101, EMP101, and now I say /A237/edit, it says this functionality is not allowed. And if I log out and test it for an admin, I would want you to test it. This should work perfectly fine. So this is how we protect our routes. So we have done both these things here. So we have in our functionality not displayed those functionality, either shown or hidden those functionalities depending upon the profile of the user, whether the user was logged in or not, and what was the role of the user. And the other thing we have done is that no user can now type in the URL and use it. We have also protected those routes. So go through this video a couple of times, and as you start implementing it, it will become much more clearer. And also ensure that you have defined it in this manner. So you have the components separate and the services separate. It's a good structure. It's a common structure that we use. So ensure that you do it. As you start doing projects, this kind of structuring becomes more and more important. So start getting a feel for it and start getting used to it.